you so much for being here. Mrs. Hemetswerker, if I can start with you. When we talk about decentralized energy, why would you say that it's so key to both energy security on the one hand, but also public acceptance, which we have heard over and over again actually at BTD, that's still something where, you know, a lot of advocacy and messaging work needs to sort of get behind. What's like the key role of decentralized energy there?
So maybe to start with first saying that decentralized energy is not a means to an end, but we're doing it because we want to decarbonize our societies. That's our main goal, but also, and that comes more and more into the focus of policy making. We want to have secure societies and we want to be competitive again. And all of this points to one solution, and that is renewables. And renewables, as we all know, 70% of renewables are connected to the decentralized electricity grid. And this is why, you know, it is so important to strengthen those grids. Now, your question, it is the cheapest electricity, it is the most secure electricity, and it is also something where people can get engaged with.
Right.
Security, I don't think I need to explain. If it's decentralized, it's much less prone to attacks. We see that at the moment in Ukraine, so it's more secure. It's also homegrown. In Europe, that is particularly important just because we do not have those energy sources, cheap energy sources, so we need to have homegrown electricity. And public acceptance, it is really great that people today can engage and not just energy takers. They can produce their own electricity, they can sell their own electricity, and we're coming to the energy sharing part of things. So you're really getting engaged. There's also business models where, you know, when we even talk about larger solar parks, the communities around those large solar parks get benefits out of those parks. So it's really bringing benefits to consumers, bringing benefits to communities at large. And this is helping the buy-in for the energy transition, which is a very complex task. We should not ignore that.
No, but I mean, if I hear you speak like that, it's like there's such a solid case to be made for it, right? We do see indeed how fundamentally important it is to sort of like make ourselves more adaptive to crisis situations. You mentioned the example of Ukraine. We see that it like drives community engagement, because whether we're talking about like energy sharing or like sort of just have that be more locally organized, it makes it such that people are way more involved. So, I mean, there's all-round benefits that I hear on that side in scaling it up. Dr. Michael, if I can go to you and we look at the specific case of Fiji, could you explain more to us about how decentralized renewable energy systems are a part of your country specifically? Like what sort of challenges and opportunities do you see?
Thank you. I think first to acknowledge that we may be worlds apart, like here in Germany and the Pacific, but we all have similar interests, right? Which is towards cleaner and greener economies. And Fiji, for those that are not aware, is an archipelago made up of over 300 islands. And so decentralization has always been part of the picture. However, the reality, like many other developing countries, is that our current grid is that is maintaining transmission infrastructure, it's very expensive. And also, it's important to highlight that for regions like ours, where grid dependence is also very vulnerable because of the increased impacts of climate change or climate-induced events. So the grid dependence that we have, it also increases vulnerability due to the increase in rainfall and so forth. So I think going back to your question, the reality is that Fiji, we do have the potential to create a series of small grids that are associated with different energy sources. If you look at the north, we have potential for wind power. Down west, we have potential for solar energy because of the heat patterns. And then around us, we have oceans. So we have opportunity for hydropower. Yes, absolutely. So for us, decentralization absolutely makes sense. And because of our remoteness of many communities, and also the physical separation between these islands, should use us as an innovation hub to test renewable energy concepts.
I mean, it's a perfect way, right? Because you can sort of like see that then very directly between islands. But Dr. Michael, if I may elaborate on one point, you mentioned vulnerable communities, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. When we look at sort of like the resilience that decentralized energy can bring to vulnerable communities, what would that look like in practice? What do you think is the potential that we can have there?
I think the reality is what we are going through right now. So if we are relocating communities, entire communities, that is already happening, what sorts of infrastructure needs to move with it? We can't have large-scale infrastructure, so we have to look at small-scale infrastructure that the communities themselves are empowered to invest towards. So for us, when we talk about vulnerability, we look at vulnerability at its core, from the grassroots communities, what it means for going towards electrification, what it means to look at renewable energy concepts. So I go back to my previous point that as small island states with low populations, with low energy demand, the renewable energy potential could be used as an innovation hub. Right? And so for us, it is very difficult to deliver this transition because we are always required to utilize resources from very small pots of funding in an effort to aggregate the resources needed to large-scale technological change. So that's why we have to look at small-scale investments. And maybe those that are seated here in this BETD conference, our dream is to find that blue sky investor that is ready to fund this major portion of this work. But it's also about ensuring that our climate policies are translated into enforceable directives. So in Fiji, what have we done? We have a Fiji Rural Electrification project or program where communities are able to themselves enable or set up micro solar grids where cost of capital for them is covered. So we talk about de-risking. We de-risk.
You give them a guarantee.
We give them the guarantee, and then they pay back using through energy or electricity use. So I think this rural electrification concept is an innovative way of thinking. And it gives communities that opportunity to drive change that they want to see.
Locally from the ground
locally led, locally owned as well.
And it is a good best practice example. I mean, you're making a strong case. So regarding the funding, who knows? There may be somebody in the room or watching. So we're talking about decentralized energy, but also about energy sharing. And regarding that, I'd love to go back to you, Mrs. Himmelsberger, because I wanted to hear from you. I mean, energy sharing is one of the major wins also that we see in the new European market design rules. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what that specifically incorporates, and also where do we currently stand in the implementation of that framework, would you say, here in Europe?
Indeed, we're particularly proud that energy sharing is now part of the European rules. What it does is, a couple of years ago, it was just not possible that you could share the electricity that you're producing on your roof with your neighbors. And this is what it does. You should be able to share that with your neighbors now, at least theoretically, because it still needs to be implemented in the different member state legislations. But it's a beautiful tool because, first of all, no energy gets wasted. It can be used by others while you're not at home, or whether you don't have appliances who are using it. But then also it has a big potential of helping grids to cope with the renewables and with solar injections. So it is really also a tool to help the energy system at large. And there's a lot of roofs which are getting unused, and people can be encouraged to put more solar on their roofs if they can share it with their neighbors.
For sure.
So it's really great to have that. Now we need to see it implemented in different member states. There's a couple of front runners already: Portugal, Germany. Now also lately introduced these rules. France has it since a while. So we need to see that much more in Europe being implemented so that consumers can profit and the energy system at large can profit from it.
So you're mentioning a couple of examples of countries that are like being front runners, but overall, would you say that we've made a head start in implementing it, or do you still say that we're sort of standing at the beginning lines of doing this?
I think we're still standing at the beginning of the huge potential that we see in energy sharing. Some countries are taking advantage. There's beautiful examples in Portugal, for example, who are front runners.
Can you share? Because I mean, we heard the best case practices from Fiji. I'd love to hear more.
Very happy always to share these beautiful examples because I'm personally excited about it. There's, for example, in Cascais, close to Lisbon, there is a kindergarten with a big roof and who is sharing their energy with vulnerable families around it. And both are profiting because the kindergarten is paying less on their energy bills and the vulnerable consumers around it as well. There's another beautiful example where a football stadium is sharing their energy with a cancer hospital in Lisbon. So really beautiful examples. And in the case of the kindergarten, they didn't have to pay for the installation because it was a company taking care of it. And everyone is sharing the benefits, and this is how energy transition is working on the ground.
Yeah. And that is so beautiful, not just because of the fact of how, we know that we need to make the energy transition. We know that we are at a critical point. We are literally poised on the brink of the precipice when it comes to the climate crisis, and there's no time to waste. But to see this and to hear this and see that a side effect, a by-effect, is literally sort of the community also coming together, and you're strengthening cohesion in that way as well with these examples, is at least a beautiful thing to see happening on the side.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Dr. Michael, if I can go to you. One thing when we talk about cohesion also as this community that is trying to accelerate the energy transition, I also always feel like we don't need to reinvent the wheel constantly because we have so many sort of lived experiences that bring a lot of wisdom from it. Considering that, what are some of the lessons that you guys have learned in Fiji that you would like to share with perhaps others that are listening here, people from other sort of country experiences in building community sort of driven energy solutions?
I think for us, one of the biggest lessons learned is to socialize and contextualize. There is no point in getting all this knowledge from the global north and it's socializing that knowledge, but if it's not contextually relevant, it does not work. And we know that two things that continue to exist: funding will always be a challenge, capacity will always be a challenge. So we need to develop or scale up solutions that, such as the Fiji Rural Electrification Fund, that is, drawing on this public-private partnership as well, so that it really works the talk. You move away from diesel-powered generators to looking at energy security, energy access for communities or remote communities in this sense. So for us, one of the biggest lessons learned going forward is you can change all the regulatory framework, you can change all the governance institutional structures, but if you don't have the financing mechanisms and the capacities to implement, then you are just doing a lip service. You really need to put your money where your mouth is and try to drive this change. And so we call on private sector to come in and bring this change that they are so responsibly supposed to do. So this just transition, what does it look like? It's not just a talk fest. It's getting, investments into the community, trying to provide for the remote communities that are on the front lines of the climate impact when they are not the creators of the climate crisis.
Yeah, I love how you said that. That's as clear as a call to action as any that we could have. So it's funding and capacity. You've at least made me very optimistic about the potentiality, the impact that we can have, what it does on the long run. So I really want to thank the both of you. Maybe we have a big round of applause, everyone, for Dr. Michael and Mrs. Hemetsberger. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. Thank you so much.